Hello everyone, I am a life of love. Today, we are not only listening. It started with a slap. Not the kind that leaves just a red mark on the skin, but the kind that tries to tattoo shame onto the soul. In a room filled with roses, violin music, and smiling guests in satin dresses, one woman reached across generations and shattered the moment with the back of her hand. She didn't just strike flesh. She struck legacy, lineage, and the invisible thread of worth the bride had spent a lifetime weaving. "You'll never belong here," the mother-in-law hissed, her voice sharper than crystal. But belonging isn't something gifted by bloodlines or marriage licenses. It's something you own in your bones. Something carved into you when you've walked through fire, tasted betrayal, endured nights so cold your own reflection turned away from you. And in that sacred pause, as the world watched in stunned silence, the bride didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She smiled. Because pain doesn't break a woman who's already rebuilt herself from ashes. You see, power often arrives in silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of someone who no longer needs to explain who she is. And this woman, this bride, was more than silk and pearls. She was storms survived. She was discipline forged in loneliness. She was a mind trained to rise above smallness. And while others saw her as a stranger trying to climb their family tree, they didn't realize she planted the forest they now walk in. Because when you're underestimated, you gain an edge most people can't understand. The edge of invisibility. And from invisibility, you build. You observe. You sharpen. That's how empires are made in silence. How warriors are trained behind curtains. How CEOs are born from rejection. This bride didn't come from privilege. She came from hunger. The hunger to prove to herself that she was more than what the world said. She grew up with cupboards that echoed, shoes too tight, and dreams that seemed outrageous to everyone except her. But that's what vision is, believing in what is invisible yet. Holding on to a future no one else can see. And the ones who endure long enough to see it unfold, they don't just survive. They lead. Disrespect is the currency of the insecure. When someone tries to tear you down, it isn't about you, it's about what you trigger in them. Weak people try to shrink others to feel taller. But giants don't flinch when mice squeak. And the woman who stood at the altar that day? She was a giant wearing grace as her gown. They didn't know that the hands she folded politely had signed million-dollar deals. That the voice they tried to silence had once stood in boardrooms where men 3 times her age waited for her direction. That the name she carried wasn't borrowed, it was built. Brick by brick. Failure by failure. Fight by fight. Belief isn't something you ask for, it's something you earn in the shadows. And this woman had spent years earning hers, not through applause, but through discipline. Waking before sunrise. Saying no to distractions. Enduring solitude while others partied. And that's the part no one sees. The becoming. The forging. The sacred, unseen labor of building a life that doesn't beg for approval. People will always try to write your story for you. To tell you where you come from, what you deserve, what you should be grateful for. But you get to hold the pen. And if you've ever felt rejected, outcast, unwanted, understand this, rejection is redirection. Closed doors are divine detours. Every slap of disrespect is a spark, and you get to decide whether you use it to light a match or ignite a wildfire. That mother-in-law thought she held power because she had control over a moment. But true power isn't about control. It's about character. It's about who you are when your dignity is stripped bare and all eyes are on you. Do you shrink? Or do you rise taller than the shame trying to bury you? The bride rose. Not because she wanted revenge. Not because she needed to prove anything. But because rising was all she'd ever known. You can't humiliate someone who has already faced their own demons and danced through the storm. The ones who've healed in silence, fought battles no one clapped for, and rebuilt their self-worth from rubble. Those are the ones you should never underestimate. They don't react. They respond. With calm. With clarity. With class. And that day, she responded. With a soft voice, she addressed the crowd. Not with anger. Not with ego. But with truth. She revealed who she was. Not for validation, but to free herself and every other girl watching from the lie that you must shrink to be accepted. She was the CEO, the founder, the woman who wrote the checks that fed the very business her in-laws bragged about. The silence that followed wasn't shame. It was revelation. Because when truth walks into a room, lies scatter. And when identity. Sometimes, the greatest strength is when you walk away. Not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Because when you truly know your worth, you will no longer stand in places that require you to prove it. She did not need the approval of that room to build herself. She did not need the approval of that room to feel complete. She built herself in the absence of approval. She loved herself through the silence of not being seen. And that is what made her unstoppable. Herself. She cannot be bought with praise. You see, there is something terrifying about a woman who knows who she is. She cannot be bought with praise. She cannot be manipulated with guilt. She couldn't be shaken by rejection. Because she faced herself and chose to rise. Strength doesn't make noise. It doesn't scream. It quietly steps in and everything changes. That mother-in-law didn't just slap the bride. She sparked an awakening in every woman watching. Every woman who has ever been told she wasn't enough. Not worthy, not welcome. But the truth is, you don't have to be invited to a table you have to build. You don't have to dim your light for those who prefer darkness. You don't have to shrink into silence just to keep the peace. You weren't born to be small. You were born to take up space, with humility, with truth, and with unstoppable grace. The bride knows that silence is not weakness. It's strategy. Because silence gives people enough rope to reveal themselves. Self-painting in when they do, when the masks fall. When the whispers become slaps. When judgment disguises itself as tradition. She stands firm in the fire, unburned. You walk because when you live in truth, you walk through the fire that could destroy others. And emerge, purified, not destroyed. Every insult becomes fuel. Every failure becomes a staircase. Every you can't becomes a challenge to rise higher. They say, you don't belong here. But connection doesn't come from blood or blessings. It comes from becoming. Being a woman who doesn't wait for approval. Being a leader who doesn't shrink back to comfort. Being a force of nature no longer explains her presence, she embodies it. Your grace power, do you want to know the secret? The world will try to shame you before it honors you. It will try to humiliate you before it honors you. It will test your grace before it trusts your strength. Try you, but if you can overcome that, if you can hold your head high when they try to tear you down, you will become untouchable. Not because you fought back, but because you never stopped moving forward. Let them gossip. Let them stare. Let them label you. Their mold, because you are not here to fit into their mold. You are here to break it. Values, and while you do yours, the bride does not stand to destroy them. She stood up to remind herself that no one could determine her worth. And in doing so, she reminded every woman in that room. Your silence may be sacred, but your truth is your revolution. Sometimes, the loudest is the loudest. Sometimes, the loudest. You don't have to shout to make a sound. Sometimes, the loudest thing in the room is your presence. Sometimes, the loudest answer is your peace. And when she turned away from the altar, head high, back straight, with the calm that comes from knowing she had won, she wasn't just walking away from humiliation. She was walking towards something much bigger. Her own story. The story she wrote without asking permission. Without seeking applause. Without looking back. Because once you've been through fire, you're no longer afraid of the heat. You become it.